I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mack Payne.
This is Mack Payne here with episode 1697 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, I'm going to talk more about a battle that occurred in Vietnam that you can never say enough about. That was a battle at Fire Support Base Ripcord. That battle has been covered in 3 previous episodes on this podcast, number 302, number 438, and number 1465. I'm going to cover it again in this one. Just like I said earlier, you cannot say enough about this battle. It was a big one. Another reason I'm going to talk about this battle is because I was supposed to present a paper about the battle at Fire Support Base Ripcord at the Vietnam Center and Sam Johnson Vietnam Archives and the Institute for Peace and Conflict at Texas Tech University. It was supposed to take place on April the 9th. But this virus thing has screwed everything up, and the conference has been canceled. Due to the nature of the conference, I doubt if they're going to hold it any time. They'll just cancel it for this year and do a new one next year. They had to do that because they have speakers coming from all over the world to this conference. With all these restrictions that have been put on traveling because of the virus, there was no way they could have this conference. So I said, to hell with it. I'm going to go ahead and deliver my paper anyway, right here on this podcast. And I can do that because it's my podcast. And I've dug up some additional interesting information about that battle at Fire Base Ripcord. I'm going to share with you portions of the paper I was going to deliver to all those erudite people out there at Texas Tech University. Since I probably won't be delivering it to them, I'm going to deliver it to you, or portions of it. One of the main reasons I am bringing up this battle again on the podcast is not just because the Vietnam conference was canceled out there at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas, not far from River Smith's seafood restaurant. I'm doing it because I want to salute all those people from the 101st and other units that were involved in that battle. It was one hellacious battle. It was the last major battle of the Vietnam War. That's why I'm sharing it with you. Without any further ado, let's take a look at it. The title of my paper that was going to be presented at the conference is A Cobra Gunship Pilot's Viewpoint of the Battle at Fire Support Base Ripcord. The Battle of Fire Support Base Ripcord took place from July the 1st through July the 23rd, 1970 in Thua, Thien province of Vietnam near the notorious A Shau Valley. It was the last major battle fought during the Vietnam War involving American and Communist forces. The participants were elements of the U.S. Army 101st Airborne Division, the ARVN, and the North Vietnam Army 324B Division. In early 1969, President Nixon began to secretly withdraw troops from Vietnam. By early 1970, the only full-strength division remaining in Vietnam was the 101st Airborne Division. It was ordered to conduct Operation Texas Star near the A Shau Valley. The battle at Fire Support Base Ripcord was the culmination of Operation Texas Star. Operation Texas Star had a dual mission. One was pacification, rural reconstruction, and development in the provinces. The other was to conduct offensive operations against the NVA forces. On March the 12th, 1970, the 3rd Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division under the command of Colonel Ben Harrison was assigned the mission of rebuilding the abandoned Fire Support Base Ripcord. The plan was to use the fire base for an offensive by the 101st Airborne Division to destroy NVA supply bases in the mountains overlooking the eastern edge of the A Shau Valley. This would be taking place the same time as the invasion of Cambodia. The operation was intended to be covert. Due to the remote location of Fire Support Base Ripcord in the mountains, only 12 miles from the Laotian border, the only way to get supplies and personnel in and out was by helicopter. The NVA was aware of the upcoming 101st Airborne Division assaults on their supply bases as a result of weeks of secret reconnaissance. It seems like the NVA was aware of everything we did over there, including the days when they would exchange the MPC. They seemed to know it all. The NVA was well prepared to contest the arrival of the Screaming Eagles and their ARVN associates. Immediately after the arrival at Fire Support Base Ripcord on March the 12th, the NVA carried out sporadic attacks on the fire base with mortars, recoilless rifles, and heavy machine guns. Those attacks continued until June the 30th. On July the 1st of 1970, the NVA got serious and launched heavier attacks. The siege lasted until July the 23rd, when the decision was made to withdraw from Fire Support Base Ripcord and relocate the combat assets to attack the enemy from a different direction. I was a Cobra gunship pilot assigned to the 101st Airborne Division in 1970 and 1971. On the 1st of July of 1970, I joined B Battery of 4th of the 77th Field Artillery, ARA, with the 101st, which utilized Cobra gunships to carry out its mission. The mission of the aerial rocket artillery and the division was to provide close fire support with 2.75-inch folding fin aerial rockets delivered by those Cobra gunships. New pilots in the ARA units were customarily assigned to the front seat of the aircraft. Upon my arrival at B Battery on the 1st of July, I was assigned to the front seats of Cobra gunships taking part in the battle, and therefore had a front row view of the entire battle. I witnessed most of what was covered in the Ripcord Battle After Action report submitted by Colonel Hugh H. McDonnell of the 101st Airborne Division General Staff to the Commanding General of the 24th Corps over in Da Nang. The entire report provides an excellent perspective of the battle. I'm going to share portions of that report with you because it has some fairly interesting things in it, especially the reasoning behind the decision to withdraw from the firebase. He began his report with background. Fire Support Base Ripcord was to be opened on or about April the 1st, 1970, as a key forward fire support operational base in the division's summer offensive plans against the 803rd and 29th NVA regiments in the A Shau Valley area. Mutually supporting fire bases would be opened at Fire Base Bradley with 105 millimeter howitzers and Fire Support Base Airborne, also with 105 millimeter howitzers. Fire Support Base Catherine with 155 howitzers would provide mutually supporting fire to those fire bases. Assaults into Fire Support Base Ripcord area by elements of the 3rd Brigade, 101st Airborne Division, and 1st Regiment, 1st Infantry Division ARVN on March the 5th, 1970, were delayed due to inclement weather in the AO. No kidding. It took a while, but they finally made it into the firebase. Operations in the Fire Support Base Ripcord area. During the period of April the 2nd through the 10th, the 2nd of the 506th Infantry and 2 battalions of the 1st ARVN Regiment conducted ground combat operations around Ripcord to locate and destroy enemy mortar and recoilless rifle positions. These operations were conducted within 3,000 meters of and around the firebase. On April the 11th, C Company, 2nd of the 506th Infantry, assaulted Ripcord and secured the fire base by 0800 hours. The battalion light CP and engineer support elements were lifted into the fire base on April the 11th. Inclement weather precluded insertions of artillery into the fire base until April the 16th. During the period of April the 16th through July the 1st, the battalion continued construction and conducted security operations around the fire base without significant indirect fire on the fire base. During the period July the 1st through the 22nd, the fire base was subjected to daily attacks by mortar, recoilless rifles, RPG, and sporadic machine gun and small arms fire from enemy locations all around the fire base. On July the 18th, a CH-47 aircraft was shot down on the fire base. The aircraft crashed in a 105mm ammunition storage area and burst into flames. The resulting fire and exploding artillery ammunition destroyed 5 105mm howitzers, 2 106mm recoilless rifles, 1 mechanical mule, and several other items of equipment. The remaining 105mm howitzer on the fire base was damaged. You can get from that portion, life on Fire Support Base Ripcord was pretty tough, especially from the 1st through the 22nd of July. That's when the decision was made to get the H out of there. Here's what the after-action report said about the extraction from Fire Support Base Ripcord. At 05:45 hours, July the 23rd, 1970, the 3rd Brigade began operations for the extraction of the 2nd of the 506th Infantry from Fire Base Ripcord and field locations south of the fire base. During the night of July the 22nd and 23rd, massive artillery and air fires were employed throughout the area against known and suspected enemy locations. More than 2,232 mixed-caliber artillery rounds were fired in support of the extraction. The U.S. Air Force, Marines, and Navy flew 35 pre-planned and immediate airstrikes for a total of 74 sorties. 14 CH-47 aircraft were employed commencing at 05:45 hours to extract equipment which included 1 155 howitzer battery with its 6 tubes, 2 M405 dozers, communications equipment, 1 M55 multiple machine gun, quad 50s. I love those quad 50s. And 1 damaged 105mm howitzer. The CH-47 extraction operations proceeded smoothly until 07:40 hours, when 1 CH-47 was shot down on the fire base by enemy 12.7mm machine gun fire. The aircraft was forced to land amidst the 105 howitzers which had been destroyed on July the 18th, and thus prevented the landing of additional aircraft to extract the remaining artillery pieces and 2 106mm recoilless rifles. The CH-47 received a direct hit by an unknown type of enemy mortar round. The aircraft was destroyed. 8 additional CH-47 aircraft received hits during the extractions. 4 are non-flyable. B Company, 2nd of the 506th Infantry, began extracting at 07:45 hours by UH-1H aircraft, but was delayed until 9:30 hours by heavy enemy 60mm and 82mm mortar fires. The extractions were conducted by infiltrating 1 UH-1H aircraft at a time into the fire base. The extraction from Fire Support Base Ripcord was complete at 12:14 hours. Companies A and D of 5th Battalion 506th Infantry extracted from a pickup zone 1.5 kilometers south of Fire Support Base Ripcord, commencing at 13:01 hours. Sporadic small arms fires was received during the extraction. There were no casualties or damage. The extraction of 2nd Battalion 506th Infantry units from the Ripcord area was complete at 14:07 hours. During the extraction, Fire Support Base Ripcord was under constant fire from numerous enemy mortars. Several hundred rounds impacted throughout the fire base during the operation. Could you imagine that? You're trying to extract troops out of a fire base and several hundred mortar rounds are landing right in the middle of everything. Heavy 12.7mm anti-aircraft fire was directed against the aircraft flying into the fire base. Air, artillery, and ARA destroyed several enemy mortars and 12.7mm machine guns. In addition, numerous enemies driven into the open by CS gas were killed by air, artillery, and ARA. That is music to the ears of any ARA pilot. When you catch the enemy out in the open, it's like you've died and gone to heaven. That didn't happen much to me, but whenever it did, it was tremendous. And now here is a very interesting part of the Colonel's after-action report. Rationale for closing Fire Support Base Ripcord. In early July, it became obvious that NVA forces were massing in an attempt to control the Ripcord area. The enemy buildup of forces and the tempo of mortar, RPG, and anti-aircraft fire steadily increased during the first half of the month. By the third week of July, it was apparent that the cost and effort required for the self-defense of Ripcord placed the accomplishment of the primary mission, that is, operations in the Bradley Airborne area, in grave jeopardy. The closing of Ripcord would make troops available for offensive use against the enemy supply caches and logistic installations to the rear of the NVA forces massed around Ripcord. The cache sites in the Airborne Bradley areas are believed to be part of the base areas of the 803rd and 29th NVA regiments. The concentration of NVA forces around Ripcord would further facilitate operations in the area to the south and southeast. Therefore, the decision to extract from Ripcord was made, and operations into the Airborne Bradley areas will be undertaken as part of Operation Chicago Peak. Additional factors of critical importance in the decision to close Fire Support Base Ripcord were the domestic and foreign political implications of another U.S. fire base undergoing a Khe Sanh or Bien Dien Phu siege. Ripcord, if given an inordinate amount of adverse publicity, might well have jeopardized the program of Vietnamization. Ripcord operations caused heavy NVA casualties and drew the enemy from his cache sites, causing him to mass and thus to present numerous targets vulnerable to heavy air attack and artillery fire. That's the real reason we pulled out of Ripcord. They did not want another Khe Sanh or Bien Dien Phu siege situation and the bad press that would have followed. Here's some of the results of the battle at Fire Base Ripcord. The NVA lost 422 KIA, along with 93 individual and 24 crew-served weapons. Friendly losses were 68 KIA and 443 WIA. Here's something very interesting. The aircraft losses. Keep in mind, I was a Cobra gunship pilot. Here were the aircraft losses at that battle. 3 UH-1 Hueys were destroyed. 10 had major damage, 13 had minor damage. 3 OH-6 observation helicopters were destroyed. 5 were damaged. 2 CH-47 Chinooks were destroyed. 3 had major damage. 5 had minor damage. In addition, 60 aircraft received combat damage, which required limited repair. Note in that list the absence of any Cobra gunships being shot down and destroyed. In the entire battle, 1 Cobra from C Battery, 4th to the 77th, was damaged enough that it had to go in for repairs down at Vung Tau. Other than that, all the Cobras made it through safely. And they did put a big hurt on the NVA. Speaking of Cobras, here's some interesting points about the battle at Fire Support Base Ripcord. After the war, retired Major General Benjamin Harrison, the 3rd Brigade commander during the battle, while researching for a book about the battle, located and interviewed several North Vietnamese commanders who were among the opposing forces at the battle. The former NVA foes stated their biggest fears were the Cobra gunships. They said they could pour fire directly into bunkers dug into the sides of narrow valleys where no other aircraft could touch them, not even the fearsome bombing runs by the B-52s. I take that as a big compliment. That the bad guys were most afraid of the Cobra gunships. Makes me feel good. Here are some more interesting notes from the battle. The commander of the 2nd Battalion 506th Infantry, Lieutenant Colonel Andre Lucas, was killed on July the 23rd, 1970, in the battle while directing his troops from a low-flying command and control aircraft. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions. I read a good deal about Colonel Lucas. He was an outstanding commander, and he was a big loss to the Army. It was a terrible thing. Here's another interesting thing. First Lieutenant Bob Cal-Soo died in the battle. He was the only active pro athlete to be killed during the war. He was an All-American tackle at the University of Oklahoma and an 8th-round draft pick of the Buffalo Bills of the American Football League in 1968. He was a starting guard for the Bills in 1968. He played the entire season and was the Bills' Team Rookie of the Year. After his rookie season, he entered the Army to fulfill an ROTC requirement from college and was sent to Vietnam on November 15, 1969, as a first lieutenant. Sadly, he died on July 21st, 1970. Also, actor Chuck Norris had a big loss in that battle. His brother was killed there. The commander of the 3rd Brigade then, he's now retired Major General Ben Harrison, claimed that the NVA losses at Ripcord were one of the reasons why the North postponed their Easter offensive that finally occurred in 1972, since they had to resupply and reorganize after the attacks. Another very interesting thing was relayed to me by my good buddy Rick Scruggs. He told me this. It was decided to destroy the fire base after all the friendly personnel were removed on July the 23rd, 1970. This would be accomplished by first having 12 Cobra gunships from A and C Battery of 4th of the 77 salvo 912 rockets in one pass. That would be followed by all the Division and General Support Tube artillery within range, firing a 30-minute fire mission on the base, and then the Air Force would take over and have at it with napalm to burn everything that was left on that fire base. And then, for a coup de grace, the B-52s would come in with an arc light and level the place. But at the last minute, just before that final strike was to begin, they had to stop. It seems Captain Rick Scruggs himself of A Battery, who just happened to be in the front seat of the first Cobra gunship preparing to lead the charge, spotted a friendly soldier running across the fire base. They quickly called off the attack. It was put on a temporary hold while an OH-6A scout helicopter dashed in and picked up the unlucky soldier who missed the last UH-1 departing the area. With that rescue accomplished, the attack proceeded, and there was not much left of Fire Support Base Ripcord when that was over. That is the story of Fire Support Base Ripcord. Anybody who was on that fire base during that battle will attest to the fact that it was one hell of a battle. And it was a good thing that we got out of there when we did. That was not a hill that we wanted to die on. We got out of there and all those guys lived to fight another day. It always makes me proud to be an ARA pilot when I heard what General Harrison said, the NVA commander said about Cobra gunships. The only aircraft they were afraid of were the Cobra gunships. That makes me feel good. We could go out there and rock them and sock them, and they would be shaking in their sandals. That's the story of Fire Support Base Ripcord and the brave men who served there. I hope you enjoyed that, because I doubt if I'll be delivering that paper out in Lubbock, Texas, at the Vietnam Conference, which was canceled. I have a feeling that it'll be permanently canceled and they'll try again next spring in the year 2021. If I'm still around, I'll be out there talking about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there. This is Mack Payne closing out episode 169 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to come again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?